Hello and welcome. Today we've got David Mahoney and we are going to be discussing myths and legends and the queen and the princess, the Egyptian princess. Now, just before we begin, you can subscribe to our Telegram channels and to nicholasveniamin.com for my free email updates. And if you're watching this for the first time on YouTube, I will leave the link below in the description for the full interview, unless, of course, myself and David can choose our words wisely due to the insane censorship that's happening right now. David, thank you for joining me, sir. How are you and what have you been up to? I hear it's noisy there. You're at an airport. What's your story? What are you doing?
Is it noisy, Nick? I've got the microphone as close as I possibly can. I've got the headphones on, so nobody.
Oh, you sound great. You sound great. But I can hear there's an atmosphere, you know, behind where you are. It's really interesting. You know, it's where I'd be when. Yeah, please do.
I'll show you the audience. So I'm currently in an airport in Ireland called Cork. And my hometown's about 20 minutes from here, Nick. So I've been putting together a series of stories about Ireland, myths and legends, because there's some fascinating stuff that goes on in Ireland. And a lot of people don't know about it, so I've decided to share because there's a couple of really important stories here which are poignant to what's going on the planet right now. But I'll show you. Look what I've got about half an hour to my flight, and I've stolen a children's chair which has got my laptop sat on it.
So before we begin with we begin and we go into Ireland and the history and myths and legends, what's the status with yourself traveling and restrictions with the testings and that?
Well, Ireland's completely open. You can see I'm not wearing a mask. They make it voluntary if you want to wear one now. I don't know how the flight's going to be, but traveling around, I've come through the UK into Ireland, and there's no restrictions on masks. There's no back passports. Nobody's asking you to show anything when you go for a pint. They've more or less dropped it, which is ridiculous now because the way they forced it, that you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. And then all of a sudden, since this little skirmish has broken out in Eastern Europe, all of a sudden this infectious disease that was killing people has just disappeared. It's ridiculous, really. So the feeling the Irish people is they're pretty pissed off, Nick, because you know they had one of the most severe quarantine lockdowns in the world, and now when they've all been forced into taking, you know what, saying that their lives will never be the same again. Life has returned to normal.
Absolutely. And do you think this is the same way? For an example, if I wanted to go to the United States, which I really, really want to go, by the way, will I be going through the same thing you're going through, or will I have to be tested and stuff?
Well, actually, they do require a PCR test to fly now if you don't have a card showing that you've had the jab. I was filming with Nick Sylvester all this week, and he flew back to San Francisco yesterday. And when he was in Dublin, they asked him to provide evidence that he wasn't sick. But I know they've just passed, I think it was 13-7 on a vote in the US now to take away the mask restrictions on aircraft as well. So I think that's going to be implemented April 1st, I think I read. So can't be sure. I've been out of action for about a week while I've been filming and traveling a lot. So I think you'll be okay, Nick.
So you reckon that eventually they will drop it completely and we will never hear about this ever again and it would all go back to the way it was?
Well, you can't be sure of anything, but I know there are still some rumors of a new variant that they're trying to push down people's throats. But I think it's gone too far already where people have just said, listen, you know, we can see it now. It's clear as day. The people that I talk to, Nick, they're all angry and annoyed that they had to do what the government told them to do. And they always felt that they were going to be having to use these cards when they go into restaurants and bars, but nobody's asking for them now. And they're not doing it in the UK. They're not doing it in Spain. I certainly know they're not doing it in Ireland. So there's a lot of anger. And people are, you know, annoyed and they feel betrayed and let down because they followed the rules. And now the people that didn't follow the rules, they have the same rights as everybody else. So they feel cheated, I think, because they had to get this medical procedure done because they were lied to and told that's the only way that their lives are going to return to normal.
Absolutely. Now let's go into what you have been filming, what you've been up to in Ireland. I really want to hear that.
You're waiting to hear. So I'm from Ireland, Nick. I've told you this, maybe you've forgotten, but I'm from the south, from a small town, very famous town called Kinsale. Now, I haven't been back in 15 years, so recently I was here doing another story and a humanitarian mission for some meds for Mexico. And I got to thinking about all the legends and myths and stories that Ireland offers. So I've come back and I've been filming some of these. Now, my favorite one, which is a crazy story because this involves an Egyptian pharaoh called Akhenaten, his bride Nefertiti, and their daughter who's called Skota. Now, this family were forced into exile out of Egypt in 1350 BC. So it's 3,500 years ago, more or less. And what they did was they came up through the Mediterranean, in through the Iberian Peninsula in Spain, made their way to the top of Spain and came into Ireland and were in Scotland. Now the daughter was called Skota, and the whole country of Scotland is named after an Egyptian princess from 3,500 years ago. And there's an official marked government grave in Ireland where the Irish government said this is the grave of Skota. And it's very difficult to find. We tracked it down. We had to hike across fields and rivers and bridges and a swamp, more or less, to find it, Nick. But when we got there, in the middle of this remote field by the river in the west of Ireland, there it is, a huge marked grave with some very large stones that have marked the official grave of this Egyptian princess. Now, what is an Egyptian princess buried in Ireland for? But the story goes further because she had a piece of artifacts with her, a certain stone called the Stone of Destiny. Now, the Stone of Destiny is a legendary piece of, they say, off-planet technology, which allowed the holder of this stone to hold on to power. Stone of Destiny. Now, the Stone of Destiny was eventually held in Scotland for more than 2,000 years by a holy order in a town called Holy Stone. But Edward Longshanks, a king of England, stole the stone, removed it back to England, and it's been sat underneath the throne in Westminster Abbey for hundreds of years. And every single royal crown has had to use this Stone of Destiny to become the king or queen of England. But in the 1950s, two Scottish students on a drunken night out and a bit of a dare, they removed the stone, somehow got into Westminster Abbey, removed the stone and took it back to Scotland. And my evidence has pointed that they never returned the original stone. So the original Stone of Destiny that came from ancient Egypt is being hidden in Scotland, which ties in because my work when I did with Gregory Hallett, I don't think there's going to be a new crowned king or queen of England once the queen has been announced. I think that's it for the monarchy. And I think this is all to do with destiny and this magical stone that has come from off-planet technology. Now, this leads me into something else, Nick, if you allow me. Mm-hmm. I know that the listeners are going to be like, what? You can look this up on Wikipedia. Skota, Akhenaten, Nefertiti. And Akhenaten was the father of Tutankhamun, the famous Egyptian tomb that was found with billions and billions of dollars worth of gold artifacts in there. But it also tied me into a coincidental meeting with a very knowledgeable woman called Elena Dunan. Have you heard of this French woman? She's an off-planet, written loads of books about the Palladians, the Arturians, and what's going on. She's channeling messages from the intergalactic force, the Federation, that have been helping us grow through this awakening we're going through. And the world's leading expert on this, well, arguably, she's certainly in the top 5, lives 20 minutes from this ancient gravesite. And Elena was a French archaeologist specializing in Egyptology. So I had 2.5 to 3 hours of an interview with Elena, and she shared so much off-planet information about what she knows about what's going to come in the future, what we're doing, why we're here, what all this is about, who's helping us, who's guiding us. So I'm editing her interview when I get back, Nick, but it's a fantastic interview. So all of this synchronicity was insane. Of a story I heard about as a child, I came back. I was in Egypt 3 years ago, and I remember the whole story of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. Then I've come back to find their grave in a remote village in Ireland, which has large stones on it. It's not just government site. There's ancient stones on there. I filmed it all. Absolutely fascinating. And Elena's information was out of this world, literally out of this world. So let's talk about the Stone of Destiny. You're saying that it's a piece of object that is off planet. Do you believe that the Stone of Destiny
is symbolic, or do you think it actually holds some kind of energy, frequency, power?
Absolutely. I think it's both. I think it's symbolic because it was removed in the 1950s, and the Queen of the UK has been on the throne since the 1950s. So I think it was removed. So it's impossible to crown another head, king or queen, without this stone. And I don't think it was brought back. I think the Scottish kept it because that's where it's supposed to be. Now, this is something similar to the Ark of the Covenant, this sort of off-planet. The Stone of Destiny was also called Jacob's Pillow. I think it's very significant that this is an off-planet technology that was used to hold power in such ancient civilizations as the Egyptian pharaohs. Now, it goes into the ancient Egyptian secrets, the Book of Secrets, and the Egyptian mysteries that these people knew about, because Akhenaten was the first pharaoh who was trying to reintroduce the powers that we have as humans with our psychic abilities. We are gods. We should be living as our own individual gods. But what happened is 3,500 years ago, another pharaoh decided to remove the information we had from society, that we can do all of these things. We can manifest. We can become our own destiny. We are made in the image of God. Each one of us is a god, but we don't remember the powers that we have. We've been enslaved because we've had that knowledge removed. And Akhenaten, his grandfather, was the first pharaoh to start reintroducing this old school religion, this old school information that we all have from memory. And he was thrown out of Egypt for doing just that. So this is very significant, the story, and now it's just coming to light, and more people are searching for these answers.
You mentioned that you had an interview with Elena. Now, obviously, we don't want to go through the whole thing with what you discussed with her, because we want people to see the first time the interview that you're about to edit and upload. So why don't you tell us a few things that just give us some highlights of that interview that shocked you?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't shocking. It was just, the energy from Elena is so nice. She's so calm. She's a French lady from Carcassonne in France. She was abducted as a child by the negative grey aliens, but the abduction was intercepted by the positive ones, and they switched the technology because she has an implant. So the technology they put inside her was to keep communicating with her. And they've been using Elena to pass on messages of hope, peace, for this great awakening. After many years, they hadn't contacted her. They came back into her life in 2011 and said, what's about to happen on the planet? We, as off-planet civilizations, not humans living on the planet, these ETs were extremely excited. She said they were happy and clapping and saying, you're not going to believe what's going to happen. So they're extremely excited about our future as for humanity. And she said many messages about what's going to happen. And of course, I went straight into the geopolitical question. She says, David, forget this. This is a distraction. Do you really think it matters in the whole long aspect of the entire journey of this planet's been? One politician fighting another politician. She said, this is immaterial. It just happens to be happening now. But the greater force, this is happening because it's making us all see what the truth is now. You can look through the lies and the mist. She says it's all a part of all of this synchronicity all coming together now for this massive awakening. And she's also talking about releasing the information. She's saying that there will be two species that will be announced publicly, that they will say, okay, these are Arturians and Palladians, and they look very similar to us. More and more ships are being spotted in the skies. Every month there's more and more reports of unidentified objects in the skies above major cities and countries. So she's saying this is all part of the great reveal, that they're going to come back and say, guys, you're not alone in the universe, we are here. But they're not here to save us, Nick, they're here to guide us. And that's a very important part. It's a big difference between waiting for a white knight on a horse to come and save us, or for us to wake up and save ourselves. And she said that's what they're helping us to do, to wake up to save ourselves.
And I think that that's because that we need to do the work, because if everything's done for us, we're never going to learn. So we need to learn. That's the whole point of this, why we're just getting guidance. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, we've come a long way in the last 100,000 years. We've moved from cavemen to, to space and fiber optics and multi-communicational systems. The technology advancements that we've had, even in the last 100 years since, World War I, World War II, the technology advancements. We're ready for this mass awakening. We're ready for the big reveal. A lot of people will freak out when they do say, okay, look, we're not alone in the universe. Here we go. These are these two different races of people that we're going to talk to first. She talked about 3 stages. Stage 1 was the first reveal. Stage 2 was showing us some human-looking people, but they might have a different color skin, blue or red or green. And then she said stage 3 will absolutely shock a lot of people because, you know, you've got ones that look like reptiles, you've got ones that look like insectoids. She says there are hundreds of thousands of civilizations out there, but we are being guided and caressed like small children by the ones that care about us the most. So,
how do you think when this reveal happens, how do you think that this will affect religion?
well, it's an important question, that, Nick, because all of the religions are all more or less based around the same thing. The gods, they came here, we are made in their image. Whether it's Allah or God or whatever you want to use, it's more or less based around the same stories. So I think I'd be more concerned about how people react, because they'll get a fright. It is going to destroy their world. For imagine if you've been a priest your entire life, and then all of a sudden you find out that everything about our history, our evolution is just not true. You know, in the Bible it says Adam and Eve, we came here, we have the Garden of Eden. I mean, the Garden of Eden again was a true story, but it was manipulated and changed to create the Bible as a guidebook, but also it's been weaponized to keep us living in fear, and all religions are like that. So when the people realize they've been lied to, and certainly people that have devoted their entire lives to a particular religion are not going to be happy when they find out, look, that's not what that book was, twisted, manipulated, and used as a weapon against you personally and everybody else in that religion. So yeah, I think it's going to be shocking, and a lot of people will not be able to handle it at first. It has to be done very, very slowly.
When you say that this will be revealed, how? Will it be on the television?
Yeah, there'll be some events where they'll do where you cannot ignore it. It'll be a landing and some sort of event. They'll come and reveal themselves to it. I mean, the US government have released a lot of video footage from fighter jets showing they're chasing objects, and you can see they're shooting off everywhere. She didn't tell me exactly how they're going to do it, but she said it will be very clear that you cannot deny what it is. A lot of people won't believe that they are ETs, off-planet civilizations, because they look very much like us.
Do you think that they will telepathically make us feel comfortable and familiar with their energy so that we are safe, we feel safe?
Yes, the two particular ones she was talking about, the Arturians and the Palladians. And incidentally, there's many different planets in Pallades in that system. Yes, they will be able to communicate to keep everybody calm. They will fill us with love. They're going to try to drive fear out of us by connecting. And the people that have this ability, we all have this ability, we just don't know how to use it properly. They're going to be able to connect to us and show that we can feel love and not fear when we do face these people. She did say that, you're right.
Does it sound like 10 years away, 5 years away? I know this is ridiculous to say.
Yeah, she didn't really give me a timeline, but she indicated it would certainly be within the next 5 years. She said all of this it's all happening right now. We are living on that timeline. She said this is something that's going to happen relatively quickly. She didn't say next week. Actually, she mentioned the number 4, but she didn't say, I don't know if it's 2024, if it's 4 months or 4 years, but she says, I see the number 4 a lot when I get asked that question.
Interesting, very interesting. Well, David, I wish
Hang
you
on. I got one more thing to tell you.
You have to.
We got talking about that, you see. One of the things I was doing here, and it was an interesting story, when we talked about events that have happened in history that have driven us in one different direction, such as the 9/11 towers came down. That started the whole thing with Osama bin Laden, everybody going into Iraq, weapons of mass destruction. The story that I was putting together today as well, and yesterday, is a story that happened just off the coast of where I'm from. Mm-hmm. So everybody knows the ship called the Titanic, but not a lot of people remember that its sister ship was called the Lusitania. Now, on the 7th of May, 1915, the Lusitania was torpedoed off the coast of my hometown. 1,119 people lost their...
We're still recording.
Yeah, sorry, buddy. I don't know what happened. So the Lusitania was torpedoed in May 1915 off the coast of where I'm from. Now, I first knew about this because when I was a kid, I used to play in the graveyard, and this unmarked victim of the Lusitania, we used to play hide and seek. I've been filming all this. But what happened, Nick, this is one of the first false flag events that was to manipulate the public into a war, which we've been in several times now in our living memory. So the Lusitania was a passenger ship. It left New York. Its final destination was going to the UK. At 2:15 in the afternoon, a German U-boat sent one torpedo into this huge ship, the same size as Titanic, and it sank in 18 minutes. Now, there was 1,119 people died on that. There's only about 220 bodies that they ever recovered because most of the people couldn't get off the ship in time, and they went to a horrible icy grave in the cold, dark waters of the Atlantic. But how did this ship sink so quickly? And the truth was that the British Admiralty had done a private deal to fill the ship with ammunition and explosives that they were going to use in their war against Germany. Now, the British High Command at the time, the Admiralty, who was in charge of the Admiralty was Winston Churchill. So Winston Churchill did a private deal, filled that passenger ship up with ammunition and explosives, and he leaked the information to the German High Command. The German High Command sent one of their U-boats to search and destroy it. They blew it up, and there was 129 Americans on board that boat, and public outcry demanded that the USA declare war on Germany. And that's a false flag adventure, a false flag event that got Germany into a war with the USA. And because of that one event off the coast of my hometown, millions of Americans have died over the years in wars, because this is exactly what they do. They create an event which makes the public go bananas. So they say, yes, we need to go to war, weapons of mass destruction, Germany, Iraq, Afghanistan, who is it now? It's Russia. So it's quite funny, buddy, that they've been doing this for so long. Even back in the early 1900s, they were doing this false flag event to drive hatred and to drive people into agreeing to go to war with a country. And it's usually based on lies. So that was the other story I've been putting together here. It's very interesting because they keep repeating the same pattern.
Absolutely.
Blow something up, destroy it, driving fear and anger into the public. We want a war, great, let's go.
And what are you doing about this story? How are you going to execute it to the people?
Well, I'll put it together in a series of short 10, 15-minute programs, myths and legends of Ireland. So I've been filming that today. I finished that this morning, came to the airport so I can get back and continue doing the editing. And I've got a few more stories I've got bubbling here, because Ireland is a country full of myth and legends. And some of these are very important to world history. And I think having someone to document it is very, very important. But Nick, I think they're calling my flight, buddy.
Okay, well, listen, it's been a great honor. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the viewers before we finish, David? No, just I suppose stay fit, stay strong. I'm still doing the meds from Mexico. If anybody wants hydrochloroquine or you need some ivermectin for any of their virus, Yeah, I've got it.
you can go to mahoneylive.com and you can still order them. As long as we can still get them, we're still giving it to people that really need this banned medication. So off you go, guys. Absolutely. Nick,
Excellent.
Thanks so much, mate. I'm sorry I was a bit late, but you're always a gentleman and I enjoy talking to you.
You too. Safe flight. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Take
buddy.
care. Bye.
Bye-bye.